Smithsonian for the organization activity. Because my area is political theory, I will begin with an exercise in imagination. My hypothesis, working from the imagination, is that Puerto Rico has objective conditions for independence. But waiting for Congress is an exercise in hallucination. Waiting for statehood is another exercise in futility. Working for the dominant political elite in Puerto Rico is a waste of time. We need to reconceptualize the way that we see the reality, because another hypothesis, and this is not one from my imagination, but one that I see on an everyday basis, is that colonialism has done something to the Puerto Rican subjectivity and has affected our organizing capacity in such a way that somehow we are not even able to see what is on the horizon. The warnings are there and we are not able to see. We are victimized, and what is deeply problematic is that some people like to wallow in victimization. So, just to present some data that I would like to mention to you, working and building on what Harry was mentioning, you know that this is our public debt. The Autoridad de Energía Eléctrica, the utility power authority, is under a monitor imposed by creditors. The police department is under a federal monitor because of violation of civil rights in Puerto Rico. The Obama administration proposed a federal board to monitor local finances. And now the Puerto Rican legislature is considering a local financial control board of 5 people appointed by the governor, approved by the Senate, without any connection with the dominant political parties, for them to be in charge of guaranteeing that the spending will be carried out within certain limits, which is, my friends, an explicit acknowledgement that the political process is not working. That democracy is not working, that we have to go outside the political parties and somehow find 5 people, 5 individuals in the high school, 5 people, and we know who they are going to be, probably the Fonalleda, the Cajon, the Ferrer, the losers in Puerto Rico, who, because they have money, people think that these political bureaucrats think that they have some expertise in administering the public affairs of a nation. So because of this, we can say that we are facing a situation so bad that we can talk about a requiem for democracy or a financial control board. When your best option is to ask Congress to authorize you to declare bankruptcy, you know that things are deeply, deeply disturbing. And that is the only option that the political elite in Puerto Rico is presenting right now. We are expecting Congress to allow our public corporations to declare bankruptcy. So let me say that for more than 10 years, I have been following ideas and data found in a report submitted by the Department of the Family in Puerto Rico to the Federal Department of Agriculture with offices in New Jersey. The report is called the Operational Plan, and it has a particular section that is called Assessment of Needs. And that section paints a picture of utter deprivation. The operational plan is an obligation that the Department of the Family has to comply with in order to request funds for the nutritional assistance program. And year in and year out, they describe the suffering of the Puerto Rican population, the social ills afflicting thousands. in some years, the report was just a copy and paste from the previous years. More recently, it is more professional. Just to give you an idea of the arguments that the Puerto Rican elite present here in the United States. Take a look at the arguments in the assessment of need for 2010. Puerto Rico has a geographical area, etc. The population density for 88 people per square, and it is the second highest in the United States after New Jersey. Excellent comparison. This data projects, this is from 2010. This data projects that 45% of the Puerto Rican are under the poverty level. This is from 2010. Now let's see what they say in 2012. The Census Bureau American Community Survey 29 said that places Puerto Rico with 16.0 or more living below poverty level. How could you go from 45 to 16? Well, that's for the Department of the Family to explain, but you get the rhythm and the drift of the way that the social situation is presented here. Let's go to 2013. The population density is calculated at 438 per square. The unemployment rate at 413. And this time, according to the American Community Survey, 51.5% of all families living in Puerto Rico reported incomes below the poverty level. So they change from year to year. In the most recent one, the one from 1414, we had the same argument. So this time the population density was calculated as 420 people per square kilometer. Again, highlighting the population density in Puerto Rico. And this time, 2014, they are saying that 11.7% of families live below the poverty level. So don't ask me about the consistency of the figures. What I want to convey to you is that consistently the reports need to mention that Puerto Rico is a small island with high population density. For your information, the argument about overcrowding conditions in Puerto Rico, about overpopulation, has been around since the 1920s and the 1930s. According to Albizu, talking in 1948, Munoz would get nervous every time that there was a birth in Puerto Rico, because the argument was that we are so overpopulated, and because of that reason, it was an implicit policy of the Munozismo to promote immigration to the United States. Just to give you some pieces of information about what we are confronting right now, let me tell you that I call this session assessment of needs, a pilgrimage of penance. And I had to confess that at some point in the past, I was very ashamed at the portrayal of the reality in Puerto Rico, because I am convinced that the picture is flawed. It is defective. Puerto Rico is not necessarily a swamp of poverty and blood, which is what the dominant class in Puerto Rico presents to the federal authority. The unemployment rate in May 2014 was 14%. But please note the following: a participation rate in the labor force was 43%. What is the meaning of the participation rate? It means that out of 100 people in Puerto Rico, only 43 people are looking actively for a job. And out of those 43 people, the 14% unemployment rate is calculated. When we include the 57 persons who are no longer interested in looking for a job, then we can say that the non-official unemployment rate is probably 30 or 35%. Among the young population, the unemployment rate is probably 45%. So these are the figures. This is the gross portrayal of the debacle in Puerto Rico right now. Since 2005, the island has lost 180 jobs. What else? We have 36% of the population receiving a nutritional assistance program. And it is interesting because those of you who know Spanish, you know that the term in English for this program is PAN, Programa de Asistencia Nutricional, which was one of the goals of the architects of the new colonial paradigm in Puerto Rico, Pan Tierra Libertad. Well, PAN is now a federal assistance program for people who are hungry in Puerto Rico. The NAP covers more than 1 million individuals on the island. And then we have only 748,000 people in September 2015, 1 month ago. Only 748,000 people working 35 hours or more. What is the meaning? The meaning is that in a population of 3.5 million, this is the labor force sustaining the whole society with their taxes. No wonder why in 2014 alone, 84 people left the island, 84,000, with a net migration of 64, because for unknown reasons, 20,000 returned to Puerto Rico. That is the net migration. In 1 year alone, 35,000 students dropped from the public school system in Puerto Rico. At some point, Puerto Rico was the so-called shining island of the Caribbean. The glimmerings were flickering at that moment and definitely are dying out. Now, this litany reaches a point in which you may feel either amused or not in front of data that have failure are written all over them. And even though we have different difficult situations socially, politically, economically, this is not the whole story. The whole story, in order to give you more precise information, is that even though we have a reduced labor force, Puerto Rico is still a winning proposition for foreign capital. What are the data from the planning board in Puerto Rico? These are the data, these are the figures. In a 6-year period, 200 billion in profits. Every year, 29, 32 billion, 33 billion. 2010, 34. 2011, 34. 2013, 33. 2014, 34 billion. So what is the crisis? When we talk about the debacle, we are talking about the government debacle. We are talking about the society debacle. We are talking about the poor people debacle. The foreign companies, they are having a good time.
That's right.
34 billion per year. That's neoliberalism, which is a system defined by the obliteration of democracy and even culture in the name of profit and in the name of privatization. So we have the materiality of worth manufactured in Puerto Rico that is barely felt in the social fabric of the island. And then we have some democratic paradoxes. I hope that this is not going to be interpreted as a bucket of cold water. Democracy presupposes that political parties are sensitive to the demands of their constituencies and accountable to them. If this presupposition is not working, then it follows that the political parties lose credibility and legitimacy. But in Puerto Rico, we have something different. Building on something that Harry mentioned, political parties are not responsive in any meaningful way, and yet they still command substantial popular support, as demonstrated by recent elections. The candidate for governor loses the election, but the political structure as an institution that claims to channel this content and to articulate such a program is still deeply ingrained in the Puerto Rican psyche. All the major legislative pieces enacted as laws in Puerto Rico since 2009, since 2004, have been dictated by creditors. They have been externally imposed legislative pieces. Ley 7 under Fortunio, the law about retirement of the current administration, the limits on spending, the local financial board, or they have been external impositions by creditors. And then we have the flagrant incompetence of the political elite. Just to give you an example, this is something that I discovered recently. That is a group that is called the Working Group for the Recovery of Puerto Rico. Here we have a report. My friends, in 2005, the government shut down because there was a disagreement about whether there was going to be a sales tax in order to boost, to trust the local finances. Puerto Rico is the only nation in the whole world in which some people had the temerity of organizing a public march to say we want 7% of taxation. In the history of humankind, people reject taxation. Puerto Ricans, because they, I have to say they, because I have a distance from that kind of mentality. They think that asking for taxation was an expression of dignity. In 2005, the crisis was completely evident. And yet, look at this number. Under the Fortunio administration, that had in 1 year alone $20 billion as part of the improvement fund from the federal government in 2009. During the Fortunio administration, the local debt went from a 53 billion in fiscal year 08 to 70 billion in 4 years. It is the largest increase in public indebtedness in the whole history of Puerto Rico, one administration. With 20 billion in federal funds plus public indebtedness. Yes, Fortunio lost, but the PNP is still a very powerful political party. So I return to my potential bucket of cold water. The public culture in Puerto Rico shows some disturbing signs of paralysis. It is a culture in which beyond all the loud protestations and mumblings and indignations against the status quo, people still lack organizational resources to fight the sinister forces now undermining the very materiality of Puerto Rican politics. I call this the swamp and its circle. What is the swamp? We have a deep deterioration of services, quality of life, crime, impoverishment. And from this reality, we go to a condition of victimization. And we talk, and we talk, and we talk. And from the victimization, some of us express our discontents in social media, or in family gathering, or in marches, lamentation that are perpetual and activism. Marches and marches. And then the electoral punishment of the governing party. And then people claim that they don't know what they are expecting. Well, for me, that's foolish. They know very well what they are voting for. They know that these political parties don't have any political platform. They know that corruption, mediocrity, and patronage are the fundamental signposts of the political culture in Puerto Rico. So I don't believe that this is a question of ignorance. I believe that this is a question of the victimization that colonialism produces in our subjectivity. The idea that we think that something is frightening bad in front of us, but we are paralyzed and we are unable to come up with ideas, and if not with ideas, with organizational solutions. Because the problem in Puerto Rico is not a lack of ideas. I can give you a list of all the reports and studies about economic solution to that. And it's not a problem of ideas. It's not a problem of intellectual talents. It's a problem of will. And the will is not an intellectual issue, something emotional, something that goes to our subjectivity. So from the electoral punishment in which people say, well, now Alejandro Garcia Padilla will be better, or Fortunio will be better in comparison to the fraud that Aníbal Acevedo Vila was, or the new star on the landscape, Bernier. And then 3 months after the election, the mumbling and the grumblings began, and we had the we had this. Apparently, we enjoy to wallow in that. Do we enjoy this situation of victimization? We know that our second most important novel, La Charca, by Manuel Zeno, produced a chronicle of a sick world. That was the subtitle, Crónicas of the Mundo Enfermo. And literature sometimes has an ability to prophesy and to describe reality in a way that statistical analysis cannot do. Well, so far the prophecy has been confirmed, but I am convinced that the swamp and the pilgrimage of penance and the circle, they are not our destiny. Thank you.
Well, I do this, I was actually tempted to say that I should not do my presentation because it's almost time. We really didn't pursue the time as expected. But I think that I'm going to bring something different kind of perspective to the table. So I do want to do my presentation. First, before doing it, I actually want to express my happiness because there's been some time since we had an event here about Puerto Rico and Puerto Ricans at UMass. And really, really our it's not projecting. Ay, ¿no puedes ayudar aquí? Yo creo que esto es como que no, yo lo veo aquí, pero no se ve. Yeah. And I mean, some people left, but I saw a lot of colleagues from different departments, and that's really important that we engage as a community, as a university, we engage in this dialogue. Yo creo que gracias. And colleagues from the five college, like Roberto Marquez and people who preach community and university and people like Juan Gloria, etc. Yosel was here, Evelyn, people from the community here, and this is something that we should do and should actually talk about it, about how this labor of decolonization, that we have different kind of approaches to it. We do it here, and we just had an argument with the university because they didn't want the center is launching a program in Puerto Rico in the summer, and the university, some people in the university administration didn't want to admit that we are a colony and that we are a nation of our own, and so this is desperate. I mean, that is not a Puerto Rican student organization. I still have a plaque when I came here 15 years ago of the student organization. So I mean, this actually speaks about our inability to serve the community as a university. Now I have tenure, I can say those kind of things. Given that I have very little time, I'm just going to do two things. One is I'm going to add a perspective to the way in which we characterize the crisis, and then I'm going to talk about and inspired by Harry and Roberto, and somehow maybe in debate with them about the rebirth of politics in Puerto Rico, in the sense of Rancière. I mean, we're in a university, let's talk political theory, no? Jacques Rancière defines politics as an interruption, as a way of innovating a status quo. And I think that there is not only the potential, I think that that is happening in Puerto Rico, and I'm going to talk a little bit about that. I think that is going to be the most of my presentation. So some key questions. I want to start with the quote by Maurice Bishop, that is mentioned a lot. When the U.S. gets a cold, we in the Caribbean get pneumonia. And I think that this crisis, we had to characterize it at different levels. No, it's part of the global crisis that some people talk about it since the 1970s, and the exhaustion of the Puerto Rican model. And we all said that Operation Bootstrap, development by invitation, Puerto Rico actually was the showcase of economic development and democracy that the U.S. launched since the 1940s, and then first of global Keynesianism, developmentalism, and then of global neoliberalism. And both of them have a crisis in Puerto Rico. It's a colonial laboratory of these global designs. So this crisis is not only part of the global crisis, but it's very important for our conversation, our understanding of what is a global crisis and what are its implications. Of course, it's an imperial and colonial crisis, and of course, it's relatively autonomous, and we have been talking more about the crisis in Puerto Rico. The second point that I want to raise is that crises are moments of suffering, and I think that Roberto brilliantly, as he always, focused on that, on the moment of suffering. But it's also moments of openings and possibilities. And here, characterizing the crisis raises the question of the historical project. I mean, there are people, like there was an article in Monthly Review recently that said it's a colonial crisis and everything is on colonialism, but we have to be more specific. Yeah. We have to talk about different levels, what are the immediate solutions, and what that it means for the actual possibilities of decolonization. And I do not make an equation between independence and decolonization necessarily. what decolonization is being, and what kind of Puerto Rico do we want? Those questions are raised, and of course Puerto Rico and Puerto Ricans, and I added things when you were talking, and when Annalene was talking, especially, it came to my mind this brilliant concept coined by vernacular intellectual Willie Colon, the salsa leader, as Puerto Ricans as legal aliens. No? Our colonial difference, how is characterized now, and what this means for our project of decolonization here and there. Because the fact of the matter, as all of you said, is that we are 5.2 million Puerto Ricans in the United States. And the struggles of whatever way are defined, and there is struggle, and there is a contradictory and complex moment of nation versus empire, I will argue, as it was Vieques, and those struggles are in many different ways, and with distinct definitions are coined here and there at the same time. The summit that was in Florida recently is an interesting example of that. I'm going to make it, I said boy. I'm going to make a very quick point here that Puerto Rico came back to the limelight. It's interesting that Larry Summers, was former president of Harvard and was the architect of the deregulation program of President Clinton. I mean, he has been blamed as one of the main people behind the financial crisis in the United States. Just wrote an article about Puerto Rico, Stiglitz, Krugman, the Kruger report from the IMF. So it's come, again, Puerto Rico, which has always been there but invisible, at the forefront, again, of all of the global designs of global political economy and geopolitics. And that's something that I would have a lot to say about it, but we don't have time now. One of the people that my favorite public intellectuals in this context has been Rafael Bernabe, who's the candidate for governor of the Partido de los Trabajadores Puertorriqueños, who's actually wrote a really interesting article called Ni Kruger ni Krugman, which he's articulating a really radical vision of what all of this means. And it's still a minority in Puerto Rico, but I think that is an important kind of public voice that is emerging, and we have to see what are the emergences in this kind of context. So in this, having said so, I want to. This is a photo of one of the organizations in what is called a civil society in Puerto Rico. I mean, that is this language of civil society and the rise of what I call a new politics of social movements in Puerto Rico, which is beyond what we have been calling for many years, for more than 20 years, the critics of the status quo there. What we have been calling the state of the political parties, which center the whole Puerto Rican politics in the question of status, and in one political party after the other, which is being criticized by all my colleagues. But before going into that, which is what I'm going to say before leaving my presentation, I think that the crisis, as especially Roberto make emphasis, is not only a crisis of a colonial economy, which is much more than a debt crisis, and Annalene talked about an unsustainable model, and Harry also talked about a colonial crisis of colonial dependency. Puerto Rico, I mean, it's even more than colonial dependency, because Puerto Rico is really a song of the U.S. economy. And some people like Miriam Muñiz and Jaime Benson has been talking about that for some time. And the crisis was predictable, because it's been there since the 1970s in one way or another, and there are different ways of talking about that we don't have time now. But it's also a crisis of this colonial state that is unsustainable fiscally, but it's a legitimation crisis, as Roberto just said, of the political party system, but even more so, it's a societal crisis. And you can see in the social ward, in the high incidence of drug addiction, of suicide, of health crisis, the AIDS, diabetes, ecological crisis. Puerto Rico, actually, talking about agriculture, organic agriculture in Puerto Rico is in my understanding, is one of the most important components of the emerging social movements, because more than 90% of what we eat is coming from the U.S. I defined many years ago in an article Puerto Rico as an island city with some green spaces because we have no agriculture. No, we actually, in that sense, can be compared to Taiwan and Hong Kong. It's a crisis of public education, of the family. So, in that sense, it should be framed, the whole conversation should be framed in terms of the crisis of capitalist civilization, which is one of the main issues today in critical theory and in the new cultures of the left, like in World Social Forum, etc. And there is a beautiful quote here from Marcia Rivera, a wonderful article that she wrote recently, that she said, la actual crisis multifacética es la primera oportunidad que hemos tenido en mucho tiempo para mirarnos totalmente al desnudo. No le temamos al cuerpo maltrecho que vemos. And I appreciate, Roberto, what you did very much in that sense. Those images are of some of the organizing in Puerto Rico, and it's not only marches. I think that what Roberto, the critique of marches like rituals and demonstration as something that is kind of normal politics, no? It's something that have to be criticized. And what is emerging now is my argument, it's not simply that. It's a rebirth of politics in the sense of frontier and interruption and innovation. And there has been a whole different kind of groups that are organized, and I'm going to mention some of them. But before that, of course, the labor movement, which had, with all its contradictions and issues, had reemerged because this have tremendous implications for labor. I mean, what the Kruger report and what the mainstream elite is proposing, and you already said that, is actually cutting wages, cutting employment, etc., rising taxes. But we have a important precedent in the 2009 moment, in which the 2009-2011, in which 30,000 people were thrown out of state employment, and part of the reason why the political party system maintained itself is because of state employment. That is going to undermine the political party system also. But the workers' struggles that rise tremendously in that moment, and the student strike.
Yes.
There was one of three important student strikes in 2009, Colombia, Chile, and Puerto Rico, and the one in Puerto Rico is rarely mentioned. And there are a bunch of organizations, of coalitions, which are explicitly talking about radical democracy from civil society, which define political subjectivity and identities in a very diverse ways, like this one, Todos Somos Pueblo, Asamblea Ciudadana, the idea of assembly. And this should be compared to what's happening in Latin America, in Argentina, in Ecuador, also in Bolivia, because there are those references. I mean, this is the kind of grassroots politics that is emerging today, and there are those references that people have also. Asamblea Ciudadana, artistas, diseñadores, fiebrú de podcast, gente de cine y video independiente, trabajadores culturales de todo tipo, fotógrafos aficionados, agricultores experimentados y gente de todos los campos interesados en la acción directa, el trabajo creativo político no tradicional, los procesos colaborativos descentralizados y la oportunidad que nos da este momento de presentar y pensar la posibilidad de cambios radicales. So this acción del pueblo, mujeres en resistencia de la crisis, some kind of reemergence of a grassroots feminist movement there. This is from Mujeres, one of the meetings. Y la cumbre social, which is interesting, is referring to Ecuador, talking about a participatory process to redefine what debt restructuring is and what are the implications that have. And of course, this had to be taken at different levels again, and there are immediate prescription that we had to deal with, and we talk about some of them. This is an interesting colonial wish list that Wilda Rodriguez, who's a wonderful sister, now actually is a chef in restaurant in Ponce, Las Tías, but he's a journalist also, no? And in a way, Wilda talk about a colonial wish list, a politics of the possible in terms of what kind of things we can demand now, like a federal bailout, as we said, and things like that. But also, beyond that, I love this idea that Rafael Bernabe came out in one of his articles about the idea of a freedom budget, invoking Martin Luther King. Which means that people are developing an agenda of reform, or what I will call, following Andre Gorge, radical reforms of all different sorts, from food sovereignty to ways in which we can devise means through which capital is not the one who's going to benefit from this kind of situation, and there could be some people's kind of alternative, and there are different programs that people are actually devising from it. I'm going to Puerto Rico next week to the first Congress of Afrodescendencia de Puerto Rico, so I'll have I'm going to try to tie in my presentation there this whole situation of the crisis to the double coloniality of Puerto Ricans, of Afro-Puerto Ricans, which is the coloniality which is for all Puerto Ricans under U.S. imperialism, and the coloniality, internal coloniality of Puerto Rico in terms of the racial question, which is re-emerging in much more fierce ways in this kind of context. Thank you.
But I also